Well, good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're located. Um, so today's talk is going to be on the two truths, and we're going to start that off with the refuge prayer. The As far as starting a daily practice, the refuge prayer, setting the mind, generating the mind of bodhicitta. To do that, you can start your daily practice with the refuge prayer. We're gonna Sanjay Choda Soki Soknam La Janchu Padu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Agi Sokpe Sokpe Sotnam Ki Drola Pinchir Sanjay Droparshu Sanjay Choda Soki Choknam La Janchu Padu Nakyapsu Chi Agi Iso Pi Sunamki Drola Pinchir Sanjay Droparsho Sanjay Choda Soki Choknam La Janju Padu Dakni Kyapsu Chi Agi Jinso Pike Sunamki Drola Pinchir Sanjay Droparsho. Okay. Um, so to start with, do a little bit of context. Um, there is something called the conjure, and what that and literally that's translated in the words of the Buddha, and it's composed of roughly 1,169 texts and about 70,000 pages. And the Tibetan style is they count front and back as one page. So this is really 140,000 pages. And these are all of the words of the Buddha or the sutric texts. Kanjur is essentially the Tibetan canon of original Buddhist teachings. So again, the idea of 140,000 pages is just to give an idea of scope, size, as far as the teachings. It can also be said that the Dharma is composed of 84,000 different types of teachings, and that the various Dharmachakras or turnings of the wheel of Dharma serve to remedy confusion and alleviate sufferings of all the different beings. So this is just to give you scope. All of those teachings can be summarized into the two truths, ultimate and relative truth. Also, I'll mention the Tengyur, because whenever you hear it, you'll hear it as Kanjur and Tengyur. And the Tengyur means the translated treaties. These are the works that are written by the Indian masters at the time. The Kanjur was composed roughly about the 12th century. And the Tengyur is roughly 4,093 volumes and 161,000 pages, again, times two for both sides. So that's just to give you scope that this is a lot. Jongshram Kongtrul the Great, born in 1813. I'm going to use a number of quotes by him, so I need to kind of introduce who he is. So again, born in roughly 1813. So he's fairly current master. And in his time, he went around and took all of the teachings that were active at that time and eventually composed them into 7 great treaties, the 7 treasures. And he has done a lot of other things. He also took all of the termas of the time, the empowerments, and composed them together, or brought them together in one massive collection called the Rinchen Terzo. And a couple times in the life of someone like His Eminence Tai Situ, they'll give all of these empowerments one after the other, day after day after day after day. And I believe it takes at least a month or 2. I think it's 2 months to go through the entire set of empowerments. But again, I'm just trying to give with Jungsham Kongtrul kind of a perspective of how important he is and to the lineage. If you're interested in learning more about him in particular, he does have some biographies. There's an autobiography called The Gem of Many Colors, and there's an older biography called The Life of Jungsham Kongtrul. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a quote from him from the Treasure of Knowledge, section 7, chapter 2. He says, the proclamation of the Sat Dharma relies upon the 2 truths. So Sat is a derivative of Satya, which means truth. So Sat Dharma means a true Dharma. In the sutra, the meeting of Father and Son, the Buddha said that all teachings of the Buddha rely on the 2 truths. Some rely upon relative truth, and some rely upon absolute truth, but there is no third truth upon which they rely. So it's also said by both the Buddha and later Nagarjuna that if one can't distinguish between the 2 truths, one can neither understand the Buddha's teachings nor make use of them to traverse the path. So all Dharma is a presentation of these 2 truths, and then progression along the path or stages is like climbing a staircase to higher and higher levels in the building. Since it is on the ground or basis of the 2 truths that the Buddha turned the Dharmachakra, and that means wheel of Dharma, in the first place, and since it is the basis of an understanding of the 2 truths, that any practice one does has to occur, it is necessary from the beginning to learn to distinguish between these 2 truths, absolute and relative. So to sort of try to summarize the 2, the void nature of all phenomena is absolute truth, and the way they appear is relative truth. Void nature, there's going to be a lot of terms that'll be the same thing, but the words will be a little different. So in this case, void simply means empty. The empty nature of all phenomena is absolute truth, emptiness, and the way they appear is relative truth, so that's appearance. So one way to say this is emptiness and appearance. Or another, we said 2 truths, that's another way of saying the same, essentially the same thing. So with Jungsham Kongtrul, the quote on this part will be the fundamental natures according to Jungsham Kongtrul. their nature in general is respectively fabrication and the absence of fabrication, being designated conceptually by ordinary individuals and appearing for the cognition of even placement for a superior. So fabrication, basically that's going to be your relative truth. And when they talk about a superior, they mean an individual who is realized. So if you're someone who has been realized, things will appear a little different. The relative truth or deceptive truth is described as fabrication and is caused to appear by the conceptual designation or labeling on the part of ordinary beings. It's the fabrication that results from thoughts or labeling and connected with concepts, terms, appearance, and identification of objects, labeling, etc. The relative truth is mainly the confusion of an ignorant cognition. This causes an obscuration, preventing the direct experience of the nature of things, suchness or emptiness. It consists of a fabrication on the basis of the nature itself, causing the nature to be experienced incorrectly. The incorrect experience of the nature of things appears to be true for the ignorant cognition, relative truth. So that's the very technical explanation. So it can help to go through maybe some examples that may make this a little bit better, a little easier to understand. One that is used a lot is dreams. So in a dream, images appear to the dream cognition. And when you're in the dream, they appear to be very real and very substantial. In the dream context, meaning when you're in the dream. And so in that case, we have a relative truth. You're in the dream, you believe in the dream, this is your relative truth. And the idea is when you're not dreaming, you wake up, that would be your absolute truth. It can also be another example, to be intellectual fabrication. So we might find a particular person attractive or appealing, but after we interact with them, we might find that person to be unpleasant. Both attitudes are a superimposition on the situation, and the superimposition is done by ignorance. So I have to explain superimposition. Translators will use this word because it's technically more accurate, but it's not common in the English language. So a superimposition or superimposing consciousness is one which adds on something with respects to its objects of engagement. So, for example, a thought apprehending sound as permanent or apprehending mental and physical aggregates as substantially existent self. The addition is the superimposition. You're adding something extra into what is a mere appearance. deceptive truth, so again, this is relative truth, uses a confused cognition, but a distinction within relative truth can be made based on effect. So relative truth, which has an effect on the unexamined, confused cognition, the characteristics of the deceptive truth still have an effect within the context of that confused cognition. They have truth because there's effect. And then you have relative truth, which has no effect on the unexamined, confused cognition. They are not what they appear to be at all. All substantial things are fake. They are not what they appear to be. So again, we'll use some examples. On Zoom, you can't see much, so you're gonna there's a cup of water in front of me. A real one. No dream cup. And if I drink that water, then that will, I could try showing it, but it probably won't come across on the filter. If I drink that water, then it will have an effect on me. It'll quench my thirst. So the effect is valid. On the other hand, if we were to talk about water that you might see in a desert, a mirage, or when you're driving in the hot summer and you see water on the road, that sort of situation where it's there, but it's not. If you were to drink that water from the desert mirage, that would have no effect on you, would not quench your thirst. Now, there's a more traditional example by Chandrakirti, so I'll go through that. And it shows the difference between correct and incorrect relative truth. So the way this goes is in a fairly dark room, lying coiled on the floor is a rope. And you mistake the rope for a snake. The relative truth is that you've perceived the snake, but the rope doesn't have the effect of the snake and can't bite you. When you turn on the light and you see that the rope or what you perceived was a snake is really a rope, the light represents your cognition. You've essentially your cognition is no longer confused. So the relative truth is you're seeing the rope as a snake, and then the ultimate, when you turn the lights on, you see that it's not a snake at all, it's a rope. So the analogy is there to point out the relative truth experienced through a confused mind, meaning you see the rope as a snake, while the wisdom cognizing absolute truth that would see it as a rope. The light represents the wisdom, the wisdom of a superior, the one who has realized emptiness. The confused projection comes from your mind and not from the rope. All the fear and suffering that we undergo because of this experience of relative truth, experiencing the rope as a snake, is tied to our suffering with being in samsara. So in summary, unless you've sort of realized emptiness or absolute truth, then you're going to be confused, and then a distinction can be made concerning the effect of your confusion, but you still have a confused mind. So they're kind of given this distinction, but you're still in the dream. You're still confused. And this idea of the suffering, misapprehending the rope or a snake is an example, can be seen in our daily lives all the time. The boss might call you into the office, and then instantly, what are you afraid of? Oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm going to get fired. How am I going to make my house payment? How am I going to do all of these things? And then when you actually get into the office and the boss talks to you, then it's like, find out, oh no, they just were congratulate you on a project. So all of your fear was built up fixating on something in the future that may or may not happen, a fabrication. So all the comparative designations, perceptions, things like clean and dirty, happy, suffering, good, bad, are essentially expressions of this projected ignorance, as exemplified by the rope and snake. It's also can be called dualistic thinking. It's the projection of habits produced by ignorance that serves to obscure our direct experience of the absolute truth. In other words, relative reality is all that is projected or conceptually designated that obscures absolute reality. So go back to some examples that may help. So normal human vision. So we may look at something like a flag, and the flag has many colors. So for that person who has regular vision, they see many colors. But someone who is colorblind will see the same flag, but not the same way you do, because their color blindness. So whose perception is real? Both people have a relative truth. Another example, use dogs, animals. Dogs, they say, don't see color. Humans see color, whose relative truth would be the ultimate truth. Neither, they both have their relative perceptions. Dogs, on the other hand, have a more keen sense of hearing. Humans don't, at least not without tools or technology. And we have different levels of sense of smell. Dogs have a better sense of smell. And it's a little crass, but humans and dogs view excrement differently. So same, their relative truth is different. They experience things differently. Now, this opens the idea of samsara. So samsara, and by this I mean the different realms, the traditional explanation of the realms of God and human, demigod, animal, hungry ghost, and hell realm. So you're in a particular room or space and you're experiencing that room as a human. But there could be a hell being there, and the hell being would be experiencing the same room but as that of a hell being, of lava and so forth, the burning flames and so forth. Or you could use the example of a hungry ghost. So this is where, when you get into relative reality, it's not just psychology, but you can stretch it farther into understanding different realms and experiencing these different realms, which gets into the area of samsara. So it's relative reality. Each person has their own relative reality that appears to be true because of the consistency. Um, People try to sort of cling to their relative truth, and they can do this in a number of different ways. So, in the Rice Shoot Sutra, the Buddha said, because there is this, that arises. He didn't say that this creates that. So he didn't say one-to-one cause and effect with karma. So sometimes people will try to look at a situation and say, try to make a one-to-one correlation, trying to look at the relative truth of what they appear and try to understand things on a more ultimate level, and it doesn't really work out too well. Even consistency, they'll try to say, okay, well, this is true, and it's still just a relative truth, but I'm going to just think of it as an ultimate truth because it's consistent. But when you measure things across time, consistency sort of falls apart. You can simply stretch it to the beginning and end of this planet. All of a sudden, all your rules don't mean anything. Or you can look at a society and what was true for a particular society at a particular time. So these are just some other examples to kind of poke at that relative reality and the way that we sort of fixate on it. Now, that was the first truth, was relative reality. Now, the second truth, absolute truth, is emptiness. Now, if in the future, in the series that we're doing, Lama Karma is going to talk about emptiness. So I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I need to touch a few points in order to kind of put everything together. So Dharma Control says that the absolute truth is that which is not fabricated by a confused or ignorant cognition. It arises in the experience or even placement of a superior. The Tibetan word for absolute truth, dondam, literally means sacred meaning. The term meaning here is used in the sense of an object which appears. The sacred term refers to the genuine or pure quality of the cognition or wisdom of a superior in the midst of even placement. So that's the very technical explanation. The simplest way to understand emptiness is to equate it with change. All composites are empty of inherent existence. You can think of it as all things change. So if you're comfortable with all things change, then it's a good start. And then what we do is we fixate on the way that we are. We fixate on something that appears to us like ourselves, our body, And then because of that fixation, when it changes, we get upset. And that's an expression of our suffering. So that's very right-brained so far. So now we work a little bit on the left. We'll try something a little different to cover these concepts a little bit better. So we'll do a little meditation, and this will break down into two parts. So the first part will be shamatha, and I'll just ask that you, uh, whatever technique you use, I'm going to assume it's breathing meditation to calm the mind, but if you do a visualization or whatever you're comfortable with, just do that. And then after a period of time, I'll give a short sort of guided visualization. Try your best to follow along. And then after that, I'll explain some things about what was going on. So it's kind of a different way of learning or teaching. We'll see how this works. So we'll go ahead, and the first part again will be just to use whatever technique you have or you're comfortable with, and we'll just practice shamatha for a little while, and we'll quiet the mind. So we'll go ahead and we'll start, and then I'll begin the visualization in a couple minutes. Okay. Now, if you're visualizing anything or you're thinking anything, I want you to dissolve everything that's presently in your mind into emptiness or voidness. Just sort of let everything go and dissolve into this nothingness and void. From the void itself, visualize a white bindu. Now, bindu is simply a dot, or you could say it's a sphere, and it's about the size of a pea. And just visualize this white dot, this white bindu of pure light, locate it in front of you, in front of your body, about 1 inch between your two eyebrows. So white dot between the two eyebrows in front of you, about 1 inch. And just visualize that white dot as best as you can. Try to hold that visualization. Now, if you're able to, try to increase the intensity or the luminosity of the white dot, if you can. Okay. Now go ahead and dissolve that white dot, the bindu, into emptiness, into that void. And that will conclude the meditation. So the visualization or the meditation is to sort of demonstrate the different aspects we're talking about. Dissolving all the visualized items into emptiness when we started, that is demonstrating in their meditation absolute truth, emptiness, or voidness. The creation of the white dot, the white bindu, represents relative truth, appearance. In order for this visualization to work, there needs to be both aspects. The bindu needs to arise from somewhere, from emptiness. And the fact that there is an appearance at all demonstrates that there's a relative truth. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that experience. So hopefully that's helpful going through a visualization example, experientially having an experiential understanding of these topics because they're very right-brained. So, so to continue, the next is we'll talk about extremes. So extreme views with regards to relative and ultimate emptiness. And these are the areas that you don't want to get into or you're trying to avoid. So Nagarjuna wrote, to say it is the concept of permanence. To say it is not is a view of nihilism. Therefore, the learned should dwell in neither existence or non-existence. In other words, don't be an extremist. And so to explain externalism or permanence a little more, it's the belief that there is a permanent or causeless creator of everything, in particular, that one's identity or consciousness has a concrete essence, which is independent, everlasting, and singular. Nihilism, which is the other extreme, is a belief in non-existence. The term is applied to the view that things lack ultimate existence, and also to the denial of the law of cause and effect for past and future lives. So if you had something, let's say, that was permanent, let's say that in the consciousness there was an aspect of your consciousness that couldn't change, that was permanent. And if that particular aspect of your consciousness was impure, essentially you could never purify it because it's permanent. You would always have that stain. You'd always be sort of condemned, so to speak, because there would be that permanent aspect of your consciousness that could never improve. So that's the consequence, an example of a consequence of that, denying cause and effect by asserting that something is permanent. This leads into what's called the tenet system, or Buddhist tenet systems. In every Buddhist tenet system, ultimate reality is described as selflessness or emptiness. All Buddhist tenet systems agree that everything, every object, and every person is free from permanent, unitary, or independent self. They're basically, tenets are simply different schools, shall we say, of ways of thinking that have derived over the years. And they are helpful. You'll hear about them in Buddhist debate, and they'll one particular tenet system, and they'll assert the sort of values of that particular system. So I'm going to just describe them in a very short way, just so you know what they are. Vipasshakas, and these two are Hinayana systems. Vipasshakas, they believe that relative truth is that which can be broken down into parts, whereas the ultimate truth is indivisible. And the Sutrantrics accept the selflessness of persons, but not the selflessness of phenomena. Now, there's the two Hinayana, and then we have two Mahayana. The two Mahayana are mind only, which accepts the selflessness of both self and phenomena, but believe in true existence of mind. Essentially, that the all basis consciousness has an inherent existent aspect to it. Middle way is the other one, or the fourth one, and that's also referred to as Dharmachakra. In this case, things appear to be real and substantial, but actually without inherent true existence. And you'll hear Rantong Shentong, which is empty of self, or Rantong, and Shentong is empty of other. So you have these different sort of ideas, different schools, different tenets, different Buddhist tenets, and each of these different schools, when they're learning them, they go through a process of debate in the monasteries. And why they go through this process of debate is first, they trying to refute the wrong ideas and faulty reasoning of different tenets. the main method of doing this is to show the consequences of a mistaken position, meaning if you say this, you fall under externalism or nihilism. And going through this debate process is designed to help refine and clarify one's understanding of the different schools. And it also helps you to develop more faith and confidence. Instead of just trusting it because someone said so, you can kind of use logic to dive deeper into the understanding and get more confidence that things really are the way that they're said to be with ultimate and relative reality. Excuse me. Now, a few little caveats here is the other part of the purpose of the debates is they have a presentation of their own system, which their tenet system is partly tied to the lineage, the monastery, and then the different tenet systems that I mentioned, the four, mind only, middle way, Vipassakas, and Sutantrikas. So the reason for kind of covering this as a whole is they're all kind of going back and forth on one saying that, if you say this, you're now an extremist and you don't have a correct understanding of emptiness. And that incorrect understanding will prevent you from practicing the Dharma and fulfilling the ultimate sort of goal. Now, also, when we get to Madhyamaka, this is the other reason I have to kind of introduce the systems, is there is an inseparability of the two truths, the union of appearance and emptiness. So if we go back to the visualization that we did with the Bindu, I mentioned there's appearance and there's emptiness, but that appearance and emptiness, they can't be separated. I couldn't introduce that until I gave you the tenets because it's only with that last tenet that this statement holds. There's no way in your visualization you could create something if there wasn't change, if there wasn't that quality of emptiness. There's no place in that visualization where the two are you can separate the two. They need to both function together. And so, and that also was demonstrated by the increasing in the intensity of the Bindu, because you can make it brighter. And that technique of making something brighter, as example by the Bindu, you could use that in your own visualizations for either deity practice or any sort of general visualization as an antidote to sort of drowsiness or torpor. So that technique of increasing the brightness could be helpful in your regular meditations. So to kind of review, we have the relative truth, which we can say is appearance. We have absolute truth, which is emptiness. And we have that aspect of the unity of the two, inseparability of appearance and emptiness. So I'm going to use a quote from The Ocean of Definitive Meaning by the ninth Galway Karmapa. For those without realization, the two truths appear as separate. When there is realization, there is only suchness. If you assert something different from that, you have gone wrong. So why do I use this particular quote? The Ocean of Definitive Meaning is sort of the main meditation manual, essential meditation manual covering everything from the beginning of your meditation practice to Mahamudra, which is the highest meditation that you can do in the lineage. And so what we're talking about is not just academics and not just for the purpose of being clever with logic, but it is part of practice and part of one's ultimate development. And so that's why I introduce or make reference to the ocean of definitive meaning. As far as there's another example I'll use now that we've kind of covered the visualization. This is the closest non-meditation experience of this that you'll have or can have. It's called the hypnagogic state. This is sort of the waning state of consciousness before you fall asleep. So you are, let's say, you're getting a little drowsy, you're awake, you're not asleep yet, but that dreaminess in the mind that you can start seeing images and so forth, you're starting to fall asleep, you're getting that dream state, but you're still consciousness and you're still aware. It can actually be very strong in some cases. Sometimes they'll call it hypnagogic hallucinations, different sort of feelings of threats or spinning or falling. And those are more negative and kind of extreme. But I think most people have had that where they're drifting off to sleep, but they haven't fallen asleep. So this gives you that view of appearance, things appearing, but that you know better. You know, you're not in the dream state yet. So now, if these three aspects, the relative truth, the appearance, the absolute truth, emptiness, and their unity, if you remember, if that sticks, it sounds, it resonates with you, then now the Heart Sutra, which is the most distilled understanding of the wisdom of all the sutras, will make sense. And the Heart Sutra is very short. Form is no other than emptiness. You did that in the visualization. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is only emptiness. Emptiness only form. So the last two are just asserting that there's inseparability between there. And again, with the visualization, how you moved from the emptiness into the appearance and the appearance back into emptiness demonstrates the first two stanzas. So depending on your disposition, different people really do like the logics, the different schools, and they develop faith by working with going into the different tenets in much more detail, learning the distinctions of valid and invalid inferential cognition and all of that. So for resources, I would suggest Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by Kempa Soltram. I think it has a 2016 publication date. The other text I'd say that you can consider it's called The Course in Buddhist Reasoning and Debate, an Asian approach to analytical thinking drawn from Indian and Tibetan sources. I think the first one, The Progressive Stages, it's a thin book, it's light, it works well with examples and so forth in meditation. The second one, The Course on Buddhist Reasoning, that is very pithy and very detailed. It does a really good job of explaining the different points, the purpose of debate, how the debates work, and so forth. The aspect, the course of Buddhist reasoning, that does have a Galupa sort of background, and so should be aware of that. The progressive stages of meditation on emptiness, Kempo Soltram, he's definitely Karma Kaigyu. Sometimes, as I said, the tenet systems, when you get into this debate and this thinking process, it does have a combination of the main lineage and the monastery and so forth all into that. So trying to encourage more of a, Kaigyu, Karma Kaigyu approach, just to keep things coherent as far as the same thought process. Now, if you really like it and you want to go even deeper, Natartha Institute, they do have online courses. They call them SPOCs. They do get into this in great detail. It's all basically Kempo Soltram and Pomon Rinpoche. It's a little on the costly side, roughly 200 to 400 per class. So I'd say if you're interested, maybe start with the first two. And if you want more, then you have that option. Or if you just prefer that, have more of a online approach than a book. So that essentially is the talk I wanted to cover. Hope that was not too much. It's just heavy stuff. But if you can walk away with the appearance emptiness and the visualization and just understanding that emptiness means change and appearance, things aren't always as they appear. And we fixate on it. And when we fixate, we generate suffering. I guess if there's any questions.
If you have any questions, you can put them into the chat.
Did you find the visualization helpful as an example?
Got a response definitely on that. And a number of thank yous. I like the one that says, the visualization was helpful, a little unnerving. But yeah, a number more yeses are coming in.
Okay. So you can actually use modern, if you're have a more science-oriented mind, modern physicists kind of go in this direction. Basically, they don't assert that they assert that space, time, and gravity are interdependent. They don't assert them as separate entities, which is Majamaka thinking. So, which is interesting that they discovered it, 2,500 years ago.
Got a question from Pat. Is emptiness like the Indian concept of Maya, illusion?
I'm not too familiar with Indian concept of illusion. I would say that the example that they'll sometimes give is that of an illusionist. They'll say it is like an illusion, but not is an illusion. If it is an illusion, then it's a thing. If it's like an illusion, then it's more of it looks like something, it appears like something. It appears that there's an elephant on stage, versus like if you said hologram, then it actually would kind of be a thing. So I'm not certain if that's the same as what they consider illusion in the Indian tradition.
There's another question about from David Munford. Is visualization done with eyes open or closed?
Um, as a beginner, do what's comfortable for you. As you get more experienced, you'd want to keep the gaze sort of at half height, meaning if you're wide open like this, um, sometimes that introduces too much light and kind of wakes you up and can generate distractions. If you close your eyes, sometimes that can help encourage torpor and sleep, and you might take a nap. Um, Longer term, it's better to learn to keep the eyes open, but as a beginner, just do what helps to move you along. Longer term, you'd want to be able to do it with open eyes.
Barbara Stout asked, do you have a suggestion on how to deal with physical pain in the context of the two truths?
Um, as far as actually overcoming physical pain with the two truths, that's really more for someone who has realization and kind of can transcend the body that way. The best way to deal with pain and discomfort, you can use a Hinayana or a Mahayana approach. So, Hinayana, you might think of the pain as a form of purification, and just the suffering that I'm having now is the accumulation of negative karma of the past, and so it's gone. And once karma has ripened, it doesn't reoccur. It's done. If you can, you can introduce the Mahayana attitude and think that, by through this discomfort, through this pain, may I uh, benefit other beings, may other beings not experience that pain and suffering. Depending on the situation and one's kind of disposition at the time, approach might be more fitting than the other.
David asked, and I'm going to add a little bit to make it full sentences. Are words about the Dharma relative truth and experiencing the practice of Dharma ultimate truth?
Yeah, words would be relative. Words have limitations. Um, they're very tricky because depending on the context, the situation, the language, the culture, they can be a little misleading. But your goal is ultimately to experience it, direct experience.
And Dawn asked, when can a glimpse of emptiness first happen in practice?
Well, that's sort of, well, anytime essentially. Usually I'd say that development wise, when you're doing deity yoga practice, the time that you generated your visualization and you dissolve that visualization, the time between that dissolving and that emptiness, between that with that emptiness point until the first time something arises, that sort of void or empty space would be an experience of the nature of mind. As that develops and you cultivate that experience and you expand that experience to longer states of time and longer states of time and it's easier to access that state of mind, then that eventually can become a glimpse of emptiness. That's a general statement because there are examples of unusual practitioners and unusual situations where, depending on a particular situation, a lama, they can directly introduce that to you at a particular moment. There's a lot of colorful stories about that happening. I'm just a little cautious with that because sometimes that can encourage students to not practice, thinking that I'm waiting for this magic moment. And really, it's for the vast majority of people, it's slow and gradual improvement and development. So,
Those are all the questions in the queue right now, and they're in the chat right now. Oh, looks like something. Another one. There's a follow-on from Dawn. Is the bliss light arising in that state relative truth or ultimate truth?
if you're experiencing bliss and it's not a metaphor, that would be an experience, an authentic experience of meditation. Can come from, depending on the situation, the nature of mind, or you're just resting your mind well. If you mean it, if when you say that, you mean you are experiencing it. So someone who's doing shamatha and they can do it for a respectable period of time will start to have authentic experiences. In the general buckets, you can say it can be bliss, clarity, or emptiness. Depending on the individual, one or the other might come about. I have to keep it general because it'll sort of happen differently for different people. So if you're experiencing the bliss, that's the quality of the mind, quality of good meditation. The light arising from that state, it's more of an expression of relative truth or ultimate truth. It would be the visualization itself was represent relative truth, the appearance aspect of it. The ultimate truth was the dissolution of it, but also the fact that you can change, you can generate the light, you can generate the bindu.
There do not appear to be any other questions.
Okay.
Oh, just a thank you. Very helpful.
Well, that's the case, then we'll go ahead and close it out. And I would say that Lama Karma, he was supposed to go right after me, but then schedules changed a bit because this kind of leads right into emptiness, which would be kind of his talk. But he's actually the 12th, I think. So I think what he had to say would fold into or what we've kind of already discussed as far as structure wise.
Okay, sure.
We can do concluding prayers. So practice begins with the generation of bodhicitta, which we did with the refuge prayer. And then this is the merit, or we dedicate the merit. And so for your individual practice, this would be like the most simple approach, doing the refuge prayer to begin and this dedication of merit at the end. So nam di tam che sapani dabni ni pedro nam pachini giga ni chi belong trapai si pe sole drovai ni droshu. Thank you for your time.